Box FM with fear.
Welcome to Horrorbox FM, Episode 8. Slide your headphones on, turn down the lights, and settle in. Tonight, we journey to a desolate, windswept stretch of the US-Mexico border, a place where the desert hides secrets that were never meant to be uncovered. This is a true, meticulously documented account shared by a retired highway patrol officer who spent 20 years patrolling the loneliest roads in America. He has never spoken about this publicly until now, still fearing for his life. It was November 14, 2014. I was patrolling Route 80, a decaying, isolated vein of asphalt that snakes endlessly along the jagged, unmonitored southern border. This stretch of road is a vacuum of civilization, notorious for drug runners, human trafficking, and unexplained disappearances. The desert at night has a way of playing tricks on your mind, but nothing in my 2 decades of active law enforcement service could have ever prepared me for the living nightmare waiting for me in the dust. Around 2:15 a.m., a sudden, incredibly violent sandstorm rolled in from the Mexican side. It wasn't just wind, it was a towering wall of choking, brown grit that completely erased the world outside my windshield. Within seconds, visibility dropped to absolute zero. My heavy police cruiser was shaking violently under the brute force of the gale, the sand scratching against the metal like thousands of tiny, desperate fingernails. Knowing the extreme dangers of driving blindly, where one wrong turn could send you plunging off a desert ravine or crashing into a smuggling vehicle running without lights, I decided to pull off onto a gravel turnout that I had never noticed before in all my years on this route. As my high beams cut through the swirling, tan fog of the storm, they caught the faint, rhythmic, sickly flickering of a broken, buzzing neon sign. Through the dust, I could barely make out the rusted, glowing red letters, the Desert Oasis Motel. I froze. I had driven this exact stretch of highway every single night for 12 years. I knew every crack in the pavement, every abandoned gas pump, and every dead cactus. I could have sworn on my life, my badge, and my soul that no such motel existed there. Yet, there it stood. It looked like a rotting relic of the 1970s, a long, low-slung, single-story concrete block with shattered windows, peeling paint, and a row of dark, identical doors. The air around the structure felt unnaturally heavy and stagnant, as if the entire motel existed inside a bizarre, pocket dimension where the howling desert wind couldn't touch it. The silence radiating from the building was deafening. As I sat there in the cabin of my truck, trying frantically to radio dispatch only to receive a piercing wall of screeching static and distorted, rhythmic thumping, a sudden, frantic, wet tapping erupted on my driver's side window. I jumped, my heart instantly leaping into my throat as I reached for my service weapon. Outside stood a young woman. She was drenched in sweat despite the freezing desert night air. Her clothes were shredded into bloody rags, her fingernails were torn down to the raw quick, and her eyes were dilated with a level of primal, psychological terror that made my blood run cold. When I rolled the window down just an inch, she collapsed against the glass, weeping hysterically, her breath fogging the window. "They are inside," she whispered, her voice a jagged, broken ruin of a scream. "Room 104. Please, you have to shoot them. They don't have faces. They took them, they took all of their faces." I immediately unlocked the door, pulled her into the warm passenger seat, locked the cruiser back up, and told her to stay down on the floorboards. I grabbed my high-lumen tactical flashlight and unholstered my Glock 22. My standard law enforcement training took over. I assumed I was dealing with a cartel safehouse or a human trafficking ring where victims were being brutally tortured. But as I stepped out of the car and into the courtyard, the atmosphere violently shifted. The howling sandstorm suddenly went dead silent. The wind stopped completely, replaced by a suffocating, sickeningly sweet, metallic stench of fresh copper, old blood, and rotting meat that hung thick in the stagnant air. I approached room 104, my boots crunching softly on the gravel. The wooden door was slightly ajar, swinging on rusted, ungreased hinges with a slow, agonizingly rhythmic creak that sounded like a human groan. I kicked the door wide open, my flashlight beam slicing through a cloud of floating dust so thick it felt like breathing ash. The room was sterile, completely stripped of all standard furniture except for a heavy, rusted iron bed frame bolted securely to the center of the cracked concrete floor. Deep, jagged scratch marks marred the metal, as if people had desperately tried to claw their way free. In the far corner, an old, heavy analog cathode ray tube television was turned on, screaming a deafening, chaotic white noise static that seemed to vibrate directly inside my skull, making my ears bleed. Then, I turned my tactical light toward the walls. My breath caught in my throat. The walls were covered, completely papered from floor to ceiling, in hundreds upon hundreds of glossy, square Polaroid photographs, pinned tightly next to each other like some sick, twisted tapestry of trophies. I took 3 slow steps into the room, my heart hammering violently against my ribs, and forced myself to look closer at the images. Each photo captured a different person. Some were young tourists, some were illegal migrants, some were local hikers, and to my absolute horror, one photo showed a state trooper who had been reported missing 3 years ago. They were all alive in the photos, bound tightly with rusted barbed wire to the exact iron bed frame sitting right in front of me. But what made my stomach violently churn with sickness was their faces. In every single photograph, the victims' facial features had been cleanly, surgically, and completely removed. There were no eyes, no noses, no lips, no eyelids. Just smooth, raw, pale skin stitched together over empty sockets with thick, coarse black thread. It was a horrific gallery of the faceless, a collection of souls stripped of their humanity. Suddenly, without warning, the deafening TV static cut out completely. The room fell into an absolute, suffocating silence. Then, a low, unnatural, mechanical hum began to vibrate through the concrete floor beneath my boots. The air temperature in room 104 plummeted instantly, dropping so fast and so low that my own breath billowed out in thick, white winter clouds before my eyes. Frost began to rapidly crackle and grow across the Polaroid-covered walls. From the pitch-black darkness of the attached, unlit bathroom, a sound emerged that will haunt me until the day I die, the sharp, rhythmic, wet clink-clink-clink of heavy surgical steel instruments hitting the tiled floor, followed by the slow, wet, dragging sound of heavy boots. I spun my flashlight beam directly toward the bathroom doorway, my hand shaking so badly the light danced wildly. Standing there, filling the entire frame of the door, was a towering silhouette nearly 7 feet tall. It wore a heavy, thick, blood-caked leather butcher's apron that glistened wetly in the beam of my light. In its right hand, it held a massive, rusted, dripping bone saw. But when my tactical flashlight beam hit its head, my brain completely refused to process the visual. The entity had no face. It had no eyes, no nose, no mouth, no ears, just a blank, pale, grayish canvas of tightly stretched, leathery skin that seemed to ripple and twitch under the intensity of the light. It didn't breathe through a mouth. Instead, it emitted a deep, wet, gurgling clicking sound from somewhere deep inside its bloated, stitched neck. Instinct and pure, unadulterated terror overrode my brain. I raised my firearm, aligned the sights with the center of its massive chest, and squeezed the trigger. Asterisk bang. 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 Asterisk. The 3 gunshots were deafeningly loud in the enclosed, echoing concrete room, the bright muzzle flashes briefly illuminating the horrific wall of faceless photos. But the giant figure didn't flinch. It didn't bleed. It didn't make a single sound of pain or acknowledgement. It simply tilted its horrific, smooth, faceless head to the side, raised the rusted bone saw high into the freezing air, and took a long, heavy step out of the bathroom directly toward me. At that exact moment, the air around me filled with low, mournful wailing. Shadows began to detach themselves from the walls. Pale, translucent, ghostly apparitions, the phantoms of the victims from the photographs, manifested out of the thin air. They were floating, their ghostly hands reaching out for me, their mouths stretched open and wide, silent, jaw-snapping screams of eternal agony, their empty, skin-covered eye sockets weeping black fluid. The room was suddenly alive with the dead. My survival instincts completely obliterated my police training. I dropped my flashlight, turned, and sprinted backward out of room 104, diving headfirst out into the blinding sandstorm. I threw myself into the driver's seat of the cruiser, slammed the transmission into reverse, and smashed my foot down on the gas pedal. The tires spun wildly, throwing gravel into the air as we tore backward through the blinding dust. I didn't look back, not even once, until the red taillights of my car finally caught the solid white lines of the real, asphalt highway. I drove at over 100 miles an hour, my siren blaring into the empty night, until we crashed through the gates of the county sheriff's station. The next morning, the sandstorm had completely cleared, leaving a bright, mocking desert sun. I returned to the exact GPS coordinates with a heavily armed SWAT backup team, forensic investigators, and the county sheriff himself. What we found defied all human logic, physics, and reality. The Desert Oasis Motel was completely, utterly gone. There were no concrete walls, no shattered glass, no rusted bed frame, and no photographs. In its exact place lay nothing but flat, barren, untouched desert sand that looked like it hadn't been disturbed by human hands in 1,000 years. The tracking K9 dogs found absolutely no human scent, and my superiors openly accused me of having a severe psychological breakdown due to extreme heat exhaustion and stress. The young woman I rescued was placed in federal protective custody for medical evaluation, but 48 hours later, she vanished from a locked, windowless hospital room without leaving a single trace or footprint. I resigned from the highway patrol the very next week. I moved 3 states away, but I haven't slept a full night since November 2014. I checked the locks on my doors 20 times a day, always waiting for the clicking sound of surgical tools. But here is the final, most terrifying part of this account, the real reason I am finally sharing this story on Horror Box FM tonight. Exactly 1 week ago, I woke up in the middle of the night to a cold draft in my new house. When I walked out to my kitchen, I found a plain, unmarked white envelope sitting on the counter. There was no postage stamp and no return address. When I opened it with trembling hands, a single, fresh, glossy Polaroid photograph dropped out onto the floor. It was a crystal clear picture of me, taken from the dark, upper corner of my own bedroom ceiling while I was sleeping soundly just a few hours prior. And across my face in the photograph, someone had violently carved a thick, wet, black cross with a surgical blade, peeling the gloss away. They know where I am. And they are coming to finish the surgery. So everyone staying tuned Horror Box FM, subscribe and like, but you can want share this fear with your relative. I will back again. Thanks.
Horror Box FM with fear.